brew Elvis Juice by Brewdog using the kit from Brooklyn Brew Shop. If you have this kit already from Brooklyn Brew Shop, you'll have most of the kit that you need already. If you don't, there are a few bits you can buy. I'll link everything that I've used in this video down below. Those of you with the Brooklyn Brew Shop kit, if this is your first time doing this, and there are some extra bits that you need as well, including funnels, a strainer or a straining bag, and also a thermometer. Again, links to all that will be down below. Those are affiliate links. They just give a little kickback to me, but at no extra cost for you if you use them. So yeah, please use those links if you're looking to buy some extra kit. For this recipe, all of the ingredients you need are included in the kit. If you're not following the Brooklyn Brew Shop kit, Brewdog themselves do post their recipes online. Again, I'll leave a link for that down in the description. There is an extra ingredient that you need if you are using the Brooklyn Brew Shop kit, and that is just a large grapefruit. This video is just going to be a quick walkthrough of the whole brewing process, and there'll be a little bit of a tasting at the end, as I have a bottle of the finished brew here. This will just get you up to the stage where the beer is left fermenting. If you want to know how to bottle, there is a video, again I'll link it below, one that I've done before on how to bottle the beer. So before you start, the first thing you want to do is to sanitize everything. Brooklyn Brew Shop in the kit give you a little pack of sanitizer. If you put half of that in with some warm water, give it a quick mix, that'll be your sanitized liquid. Just use that to sanitize all of the bowls, the thermometer, everything that you're going to use, anything that could touch your beer. Basically, you want that to be sanitized before you use it. So it's a good idea to get those things soaked, rinsed before you start brewing. Once that's done, we'll move on to the first step, which is mashing. To start the mashing process, you want to heat 2.4 litres of water to 71 degrees centigrade. And then once the water is up to temperature, you want to take the bag of grain from the kit and you want to empty the contents into that water. At this point, you can probably turn the heat off and you want to just mix the grains in a little bit into the water and set a timer for 60 minutes, because that's how long this grain is going to be cooking for. Now for that 60 minutes, it's important to keep the grain at a temperature of between 63 and 68 degrees Celsius. So my advice would be to turn the heat off, put the thermometer in, keep an eye on the temperature, make sure it's sat between that 60 to 68 degrees, that 63 to 68 degrees range. Keep checking on it every 10 minutes or so, give it a quick stir, and just to make sure that it's okay. And if I was you, I would also take different temperature readings from around the pot, just to make sure that you're not just getting a reading from one really warm or one really cold spot, just to make sure that it's evenly heated. Once those 60 minutes are up, you want to turn the heat back up and constantly stir. Effectively, you're mashing the grain together until the temperature reaches about 77 degrees Celsius. This process is known as the mashing out process, and you're effectively trying to mash all of the sugars out of the grain into the liquid, ready for the next step. Once that mix of malts and liquid is now back up to 77 degrees, you can now turn off the heat, and the next step is to make the wort, which is the beer. And we do that by taking another 4.25 litres of water, heating that in a separate pot, and then pouring that over into the grains. So the first thing to do is to heat 4.25 litres of water up, again up to 77 degrees Celsius. Then you want to set yourself up a little straining container, so either with a strainer or a straining bag into a different pot. You want to set that strainer over the pot and then pour the grains into it. Once the other pot of water has reached 77 degrees, you then want to take that water and pour that over the grains too, so that runs and passes through the grains and again collects all the sugars, and that will ultimately be the beer. So the goal here is to be left with about 4.75 litres of water in the end. That'll be ready for the next step. So once you've got that 4.75 litres of liquid, you want to pass that back through the grain again once or twice, again just to make sure you get all of the good stuff out of that malt before we move on to the next stage. So what you now should be left with is 4.75 litres of liquid. This liquor is effectively the wort, this is the beer, and now we're going to go into the process of boiling, adding hops and flavour, and then getting it ready to be fermented. So those grains can now be disposed of. You can either throw them away, or they can be used for composting or for baking bread. And now what you want to do is take that 4.75 litres of your beer and you want to put it onto a hob and you want to heat it until it is effectively boiling. So you want to heat it at max heat until it starts to foam over. And at the point that it starts to foam over, reduce the heat and try and keep it at a consistent boil. So you want it, it's sitting around 100 degrees, boiling slowly, but just not enough so that it's boiling over. Once it's reached that point, so once it's like nearly boiled over and now it's just sat simmering away, you want to set a timer again for 60 minutes and then add 5 pellets of the Citra hops. So these Citra hops will be used for bittering, and then later on during the boil process we'll be adding more hops for different techniques. So some of them will be used for aromas and extra flavour. So after 30 minutes you want to add a third of the Amarillo hops and a third of the Simcoe hops. Again, give them a quick stir and you're good again until about 5 minutes before the end. So after 55 minutes, so with 5 minutes left of the boil, you now want to basically cut the grapefruit and squeeze all the juice of that grapefruit into the beer whilst it's boiling away. You leave it to the end because at that point then we know that the beer's near enough boiled, it's ready to be turned off and it's soon to be cooled down. So that'll mean that the flavours of the grapefruit will come through instead of just being burnt and effectively just boiled away. So right at the very end, so after the 60 minutes are up, after your timer is going off, you want to turn off the heat and then you want to add another third of the Amarillo and another third of the Simcoe hops and half of the remaining Citra. So that will leave you with some hops left, and that's fine. We're going to use those for dry hopping later. This is just now for flavouring during this boil process. Those hops, you can put them to the side, you can put them in the fridge, is probably the best place to keep them for now, and we'll be using those for dry hopping later. So at this point, after that 60 minutes of boiling, some of that liquid will have evaporated. So that should leave you with about 3.8 litres, which is effectively a gallon of beer. If you have a little bit more or a little bit less, it's not a problem. We can resolve that later, but effectively, yeah, you want it to be left now with about 3.8 litres. So the next step we want to do is to cool this liquid down. So before we can start adding the yeast, the beer needs to come down to a suitable temperature so as not to kill off the yeast and to it could result in off flavours in the beer, which is obviously not what we want. So for this, I've just taken the pot, put it into my sink, fill the sink with cold water and lots of ice to cool it down. Just leave a temperature in there, keep checking on it every now and then, but you want to try and bring this down to room temperature as fast as you can. The longer it's exposed to the air, obviously, the worse it is. So yeah, the quicker we can cool this down, the better. So I've just used an ice bath to do that. Once it's cooled, it's now a case of just transferring it from the pot into the demijohn. You can do this however you want. At this stage, this is really the only stage where you would want oxygen to come into contact with the beer. At all other stages further down the process, like, you do not want oxygen in the beer at all. But now, because we're about to feed it some yeast, that oxygen is good for the yeast. So pouring this straight into the demijohn is totally fine through the funnel. I would recommend using a small strainer over the top of the funnel just to catch any of the bits, any hot bits that are left behind in the liquid. But yeah, effectively just pour it straight into the top of the demijohn. Once that's done, it's now a case of just pitching the yeast. So this is as simple as snipping the top off the yeast pack that you've got from Brooklyn Brew Shop and pouring that into the top of the demijohn. Then take your hand and sanitize it, put it on top and give the demijohn a good shake. So this will just wake the yeast up and again help with aerating it, so giving it oxygen so that it's ready to start doing its job. And that is effectively it. So at this point you've got beer in the demijohn and the yeast has been pitched, you've gone through the whole process, and now it's a case of fermenting it. So this is where you leave the beer at room temperature for about 2 weeks to complete the fermentation process. So at this point the yeast will now be going through, eating all those sugars, and it will convert them into carbon dioxide but also alcohol too, which is why you need to prepare either the airlock or, to start off with, you might want to use a blow-off tube. Again, this is dead simple. You put a tube into the top of the demijohn and leave the end of the tube in a pot of sanitized water. If you want a more detailed process of how to do this, I'll have a longer video with the Brooklyn Brew Shop Punk IPA kit, which again I'll link down below. Or you could just use the airlock. At this stage it should be fairly safe to do so. So as I said, those remaining hops that you have, leave those in a fridge, and after a week of fermenting you'll want to quickly just take the top off the demijohn, sprinkle the rest of those hops in quickly and put the top back on. This is a process called dry hopping, and this adds lots of flavour and also lots of aroma to the beer as well. This is what gives it that classic Elvis juice Grapefruit flavour, that juicy beer style, is the process of dry hopping. So that's why we've saved those hops until now. So we want to do that 1 week into the fermentation process. After 2 weeks, take the beer out and it's now ready to be bottled. Again, if you want to see how to bottle beer, I have got a video for this which will be linked down below that'll walk you through the process for that too. But for now I think it's time to try this beer because I've already been through this process. I've got the beer bottled here, so let's give it a go. So as you can see, the bottling process has worked. The beer is fizzed. You can see the balls rising up onto the top of the bottle. So I primed the beer with honey. So effectively, by adding a little bit of sugar to the liquid before it gets bottled, you're effectively re-feeding the yeast some sugars. But because you're closing the top rather than having an airlock, that carbon dioxide is being locked inside the bottle, and that's what creates the bubbles. And there it is. Helps if you have the proper glassware too. It's quite nice. So yeah, so that's what you end up with. You end up with beer. It tastes and looks like beer. Now it's never going to be exactly like Elvis Juice. You know, you're brewing this on, you know, a basic kit. All of the ingredients are probably not exactly the same, but in terms of what you get at the end of it, it's very drinkable and quite delicious beer. You can definitely taste the grapefruit. It's quite bitter. It's quite punchy, like the Brewdog beers are. So yeah, overall, I'd say that turned out pretty well. Hopefully, this helps you get up and running with your Brooklyn Brew Shop kits. Again, as I've said, there are more videos. So there is the Brewdog Punk IPA kit and also the chocolate-covered pretzel porter video too. And if you need help with bottling, I'll leave that video down below too. Feel free to comment on these videos and ask any questions. I'll be happy to help, or you can find me on Instagram too. Anyway, that's been it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.